for episode 5. In the case of Kimber and Stormer, they're about to put their solo careers to the test, so the story begins in Starlight Mansion. Anyway, the holograms are getting ready for band practice as usual, and at first they had no idea which song they want to do, so Kimber suggested a love song or something else, but unfortunately she's been outvoted. Anyway, the rehearsal was about to become a disaster when Kimber got fed up with nobody listening to her. It was right after Jim explained to Kimber and her bandmates that, as it is, the record promoting is a bit late. So after Kimber got fed up for everyone ignoring her, that's when she stormed off. Meanwhile, at Misfits Music, Stormer said that she has some good news for herself and her bandmates, that she has a new song. But just like that, the three of her bandmates started insulting her and bullying her and etc. And of course, after a list of insults, Stormer too said that she had enough of her bandmates ignoring her, just like what the holograms did with Kimber. So she too decides that she had reached her limit, and then she stormed off. Meanwhile, at the nightclub, Kimber was the first to show up, and as you may have guessed it, the lounge lizards were performing. The moment that Kimber sits down on the bar, she ordered a milkshake. Peach. Extra thick, that is. But next to her is Stormer, ordering a banana split and, of course, a vanilla Coke. Oh, I made a slip up on the band's name. They're the Limp Lizards, and they just finished performing. So Stormer says, have some more. Put some more music on. So at that moment, when the time that Kimber saw Stormer that was sitting next to her, you can tell that both Kimber and Stormer were not exactly happy to see each other at all, at least a bit. Anyway, Kimber was a bit upset about that insult that Stormer made until somebody on the microphone says, ladies and gentlemen, we got a couple of celebrities joining us. We got Stormer of the Misfits and of course Kimber of the Holograms. And the audience cheered and they both agreed to be up on stage. So both Kimber and Stormer started playing with their song I'm Okay, which is the first duet that they ever did. After their song came to an end, the audience cheered. They loved it. So the manager of the club agrees to let them come back later on. So they both agreed. Both Stormer and Kimber, that is. So back at Starlight Mansion, while Kimber is putting on her makeup in her bedroom, Jericho wanted to speak with her, but Kimber in response said that she had nothing to say to her. So, after passing by in the living room on her way out, she stepped out of the mansion, and here comes Stormer coming to pick her up. After that, both Stormer and Kimber left the mansion. So from that point on, both Kimber and Stormer were performing in clubs everywhere. When back at Misfits Music's recording studio, three of the Misfits started to miss Stormer very much. However, from that point forward, their performance in the recording studio didn't go so well. Back with Stormer and Kimber, after they continued to be a hit in clubs everywhere, that was until Dave approached them and said, hey, ladies, you look great. Why don't we sit down and have a talk? So they agreed. As you may have guessed it, as the ladies, Stormer and Kimber sat with Dave, he discusses the deal that he wants to make with them. So the first thing that Dave did was to hand them a contract, both Stormer and Kimber, that is. And as Stormer and Kimber were looking at it very carefully, as Dave explains what the deal was. So Dave told Stormer and Kimber after the ladies looked at the contract, he says, all you have to do is to sign on the bottom line. Then I'll give you some of the money to start. But then Dave says, wait, there's a catch. If you can give me something in return for collateral, in case if you didn't make the record, I'm pretty sure there might be something you have. But then Dave told Stormer and Kimmer that there's a problem. The last band that I signed up with said the exact same way. And you know what happened? They didn't finish the record. So then Kimber says, are you kidding? Of course we'll finish the record. Then it's settled then, Dave said. So Dave told him, what's it gonna be? It'll show good faith that you'll be hit, guarantee. So after Stormer had told Dave that there's no way that they could afford that kind of money to back them up somehow. And then he asked Kimber a question. You do own half of Starlight Music, right? So all you have to do is just give me half of Starlight Music as a collateral. That's all. What have you got to lose? So after Kimber and Stormer had thought it over and discussed it with each other, at first they didn't think it was a good idea and insisted something was off and they weren't sure of it. So Kimber and Stormer, after Dave assures them it'll show good faith, they decided to sign a contract, both Kimber and Stormer together. After Kimber and Stormer had signed their contract, they head off. At the same time, Dave heads out to make a phone call. And guess who he's calling? None other than the ever ruthless Eric Raymond. So, what was that phone call to Eric for? Well, Dave just told him the good news. Dave even said that neither Stormer nor Kimber had suspected a thing, at least not yet. In Eric's upstairs office, after hearing the good news, Eric said, "Splendid. Once everything's taken care of, Starlight Music will be mine once again." Little did Kimber nor Stormer knew that Dave was working for Eric, but they were unaware of it. Later, Kimber and Stormer had appeared on the Lindsay Pierce show. Watching it on TV at the Gabor estate were the Misfits. You can tell they're not pleased with this at all. Same thing with the Holograms when they watched the exact same show at the Starlight Mansion. And the holograms knew that they had to do something about it to talk some sense to Kimber, and the mistress did the same to talk some sense to Stormer, so that's what they did. And by how, you may ask? The next time that Kimber and Stormer performed at the club, that's when both of their former bandmates started talking some sense into both Stormer and Kimber with their song, Bad Influence, by both the holograms and the Misfits. But neither Kimber nor Stormer can listen to them. They ignored them. So, in agony of defeat, that's when both Jim and her bandmates, and also Pizzazz and her misfits, decide to leave. So, after the bandmates left and their song came to an end, both Stormer and Kimber made a promise to each other. The next morning at Starlight Mansion, that's when Jerica decided to take matters in her own hands to convince Kimber otherwise. So after looking in Kimber's bedroom and she found a contract in the dresser drawer, she looked at it very carefully, but that's when Kimber catches Jerica in the act and said, "What are you doing here?" Then Jerica told Kimber about that contract that both her, Kimber, and Stormer had both signed the previous night at the club. Then Jerica explains about the small print that both Stormer and Kimber were not aware of that said, quote, "If Kimber and Stormer have failed to finish the record, then that means that half of Starlight Music belongs to that creep, Eric Raymond." Kimber, after she heard from Jerica, she says, "What? Of course we'll make the record a hit. I'm sure of it." So Jerica had tried to convince her sister otherwise that this is all a trick, a scam, for Eric to get his hands on Starlight Music somehow. But Kimber doesn't want to hear about it, but tells her sister that, "I assure you that one way or another this record will be a hit. I promise you that." And so Kimber leaves the bedroom. So later at the Flash recording studio, both Stormer and Kimber were auditioning for their new album. But however, many auditions didn't go so well. And if things are not bad enough, the recording artist just told Stormer and Kimber the bad news that they had to make a new tape because the tape broke for some unknown reason. And here's something even more worse. By the time that both Kimber and Stormer redid the tape and by the time they played it, it sounded horrible. Stormer told Kimber, "Well, at least the tape didn't break this time." So meanwhile, at the Phillips residence, Stormer and Kimber were discussing about how they needed help and they needed bad, desperately. So when Stormer suggested it to Kimber, Kimber soon dismisses it and said that there's no way. Then Kimber told Stormer that if we don't do this by ourselves, we'll be heckled and laughed at. And worst of all, humiliated. Meanwhile, the holograms were performing at the club, but things didn't go so well for them. And that's when Asha, Shayna, Rhea, and Jim started to miss Kimber and they became depressed. Kimber and Stormer, however, returned to the Flash recording studio later that afternoon. As you may have guessed it, things didn't go so well for them either. And they too start to wonder if they'll ever finish the record in time. As Kimber and Stormer were walking in the hallway, that's when Kimber told Stormer, "We can't quit now. The album's almost done anyway." But then, up ahead, there was an open door. Little didn't Stormer and Kimber know they were about to overhear a conversation between a recording artist and someone else over the phone. So when the recording artist spoke to someone else over the phone, which they're not aware of, they being Stormer and Kimber, that's when the recording artist said, "There's no way that these two girls are going to finish this record in time. I can assure you." Then both Stormer and Kimber, by the time they looked inside, but they didn't realize that the recording artist was talking to Eric Raymond himself. The girls were in shock. They were enraged. They just couldn't believe what they heard. That recording artist was working for Eric Raymond himself. Kimber should have known. At that moment, it was all part of Eric's plan to make sure that Stormer and Kimber will feel, and of course, that made Kimber upset. And so not only she catches the recording artist in the act, then she snatches the phone away from him to say that, quote, first of all, he's not getting away with it. And second of all, they will finish that record one way or another, no matter what. After Kimber hangs up the phone, now both Stormer and Kimber had their act of revenge to fire the recording artist on the spot. So angry and disgusted, that's when he said, "Good luck to you, ladies," and then after that he left. So after the recording artist had left, Kimber, now ashamed with regret and guilt that what her sister said was absolutely true and she completely ignored her. She should have listened to her. Now she wished she had. So now Kimber and Stormer is faced with a bigger problem, how they're going to get a recording artist. Back with the Misfits at their recording studio at Misfits Music, that's when they realized that it didn't sound the same without Stormer, and that they're beginning to be depressed as well as the holograms did. They missed her, as much as Pizzazz hates to admit it. But aha, Pizzazz said to both Jetta and, of course, Roxy that she has a plan to get Stormer back. The first thing that Pizzazz did was to park a red Porsche outside so that Stormer can see it. But when Stormer refused to go back to the Misfits, that's when Pizzazz says, "Oh no, not even if we had this beautiful red Porsche outside." When Stormer saw the car, she was overjoyed. Even better, Jetta even gives Stormer a bunch of credit cards. Once Jetta gives Stormer a bunch of credit cards and Stormer in her new car, she tells the missus, "Oh dear, this is so wonderful. All I ever wanted was for all of you to appreciate me." So off with her brand new car, as you can tell that Stormer is very happy. So you know what this means? That means the Misfits got Stormer back. So speaking of which, back with her, she does what she knows best, go shopping. Back with Kimber at the Flash recording studio, she couldn't find Stormer anywhere. But unbeknownst to her, as you may have guessed it, Stormer does what any girl will do, shop for clothes, jewelry, and everything else. And she went riding in her brand new car. So back with Kimber, after having no luck finding Stormer, she was shocked and dismayed that she just read a note from Stormer that said, quote, "Dear Kimber, I've decided to go back to the Misfits." Kimber was shocked at this horrible news. Back with Stormer, she's now in the bedroom of the Phillips house, staring at the picture of both herself and Kimber after she finished shopping. Back with Kimber, she went to Eric's upstairs office at Misfits Music to tell him the bad news. She said that Stormer, she should have realized from the start that once a misfit is always a misfit, and that's what Stormer will be for the rest of her life. When Eric had heard the good news, he seems delighted with it. He realized that at long last, after all this time, that Starlight Music was going to be his. But then at the last minute, Stormer's voice says, "Not so fast," because she just told Kimber the good news that her melody track was finished. So you know what this means. Both Stormer and Kimber have finished their first record. When Eric saw the finished record, he couldn't believe it. As you may have guessed it, Stormer just told Kimber how bad she felt that she, Kimber, had almost lost Starlight Music to that creep Eric Raymond. But the best of it all is that Stormer, ever since she returned to the Misfits, had showered her with gifts and had something that she never had before, friendship. But then Eric told the ladies not so fast, and then said, "I have to admit that you ladies did accomplish the impossible. I'm impressed." Now Eric said that here comes a problem, because all Kimber and Stormer need is for someone to promote the record. Eric also says that here comes a bigger problem. If the record, if by some miracle will become a hit, nobody's going to buy it. for Stormer and Kimber that's indeed a serious problem. Then Eric said that here comes a bigger problem. Unless the record is promoted, then that means Starlight Music will still be his no matter what. So after Stormer and Kimber, after hearing the bad news, they left Eric's office. So all they need is for someone who could help them. And that would be Kimber's sister, Jerica. So back at Starlight Mansion, both Stormer and Kimber had discussed the situation to Jerica, and what's even more worse is that the first thing that Kimber did was to apologize to her sister for taking her for granted and for not listening to her and for ignoring her. Jerica not only forgives her sister, but Jerica wants to know from her sister if that's what she wanted for the record to be promoted from Jerica herself. So Kimber not only said that she's sure, and it will be the first time that both Kimber and Stormer's record will be promoted. So then it's Jerica's turn to apologize to her sister for ignoring her and taking her for granted. She shouldn't have done it. So Jerica was more than happy to help out Kimber and Stormer, and so did the rest of the bandmates. So you know what this means? The holograms got Kimber back. So we go into the promotion montage of both Kimber and Stormer's first record with Getting Down to Business from last season. After that, what's even better is that Jerica just read the front page of the newspaper that Stormer and Kimber's first record just made it to Dumbo Platinum. So you know what this means? The record was a hit. What's even more better is that Starlight Music became Jerica's once again. You can tell that Stormer and along with the holograms are very overjoyed. And of course, Jerica told Stormer that even better, you can join us in our company, meaning Starlight Music. But then the Misfits show up and say, not so fast, Stormer belongs to us. As much as Stormer hates to admit it, she told Jerica, a Stormer that is, the bad news, that she does belong with them. So you've heard right, Kimber is now back with the holograms, and Stormer was back with the Misfits. But there's one condition, Stormer says, that if Pizzazz, Jetta, and Rossi can listen to her from now on. And even better, after all, she is partners with Starlight Music, and so the three of them agreed. Before leaving, Stormer told Kimber that they have a lot in common than what they thought, and that maybe they can collaborate again someday. And Kimber agrees. And so that ends episode 5.